Good evening, and thank you for tuning in to the Star of Zion. We bring you greetings on behalf of our Chief Communications Officer and Editor-in-Chief of the Star of Zion, Mr. Daran Kent, where we are guided by our three pillars of faith, love, and truth, and we are bringing you news that is relevant and reliable. Tonight, we have a special treat for you, as we will introduce to you our newly appointed editor for entertainment and the arts, Reverend Deirdre Parker Rosen. Reverend Parker is a member of the AMEZ Zion Church, a pastor of the Terrell's Chapel, AMEZ Zion Church in Pittsboro, North Carolina, Durham District, Central North Carolina Conference. We thank you so much for tuning in and ask that you will go and follow us on YouTube. Visit our website, www.starofzion.org. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and subscribe to our paper so you can continue to be informed with the news that we have to bring to you. I present to you now Reverend Deirdre Parker Rosen.
Good evening, Sam. It's so good to see you, and I'm very excited to be here tonight.
Awesome. I'm so glad you're here, and just want to welcome you officially, publicly, to the Star of Zion team. We're so glad to have you.
I'm so happy to be here. So happy to be here.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I congratulate you on hosting your first live, and we're so excited about the conversation you have tonight for the soundtrack of our lives. And I'll just turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. Now, what is the soundtrack of your life? Not everybody's soundtrack will be the same because we are of a specific era. I know for my parents, it was the music of the 50s and the 60s, Fats Domino, the Platters, and Sam Cooke. My parents' soundtrack came in the mail one day. It came in a shiny cardboard box that they ordered from an infomercial. They invited their friends over and they played albums and they danced and laughed like they were teenagers. It was the most amazing thing I had ever seen. Now, my soundtrack is right around the Jackson 5 New Edition back in the Candy Girl days era. Black music has a way of reminding us of the things we always want to remember and the things we hope we live to forget. Since June is Black Music Appreciation Month, I wanted to talk about the genre that was created by us, jazz. Now, I'm not a jazz aficionado, so I reached out to one of my former professors, Dr. Daran Mitchell, who is an adjunct professor of preaching at Hood Theological Seminary, pastor of Trinity AMEZ Zion in Greensboro, a hymnologist, a vocalist, and a jazz lover. And I am so excited to have Dr. Mitchell to join us today.
Thank you, Deirdre.
Dr. Mitchell.
Good evening, Reverend Deirdre Parker Rosen. It's good to be with you tonight. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us today. And I want you to just introduce yourself a little bit, and then I want to talk about how you became interested in jazz.
Daran Mitchell, Daran Hernandez Mitchell. Long story about Hernandez. Ask my mom when you see her, ever meet her. But it's Daran Hernandez Mitchell. I'm from the beautiful city of Tampa, Florida. Grew up in Belmont Heights. Anybody from Tampa, Belmont Heights, East Tampa in the house. Baptized at the Hood Temple AMEZ Zion Church, the church of my birth, church that was founded by my family, and for the last 108 years has been touching and telling Tampa the good news of Jesus. Received Christ at the altar of that church, was called to preach there, ordained deacon and elder, South Florida Conference, graduate of Bethune-Cookman, graduate of Hood, graduate of Virginia Union, all HBCUs, and love God, love Christ, love community, love culture. especially our culture that has given the world such a tremendous gift. Oftentimes that gift has been abused and misused, but thanks be to God, there are those of us who appreciate the gift, especially the gift of the Black church. Uh, you talk about my introduction to jazz. As I shared in the article, it came three ways. It came through Middleton, the Muppets and movies. Uh, Muppets because I love the Muppets growing up, and I loved Zoot, who played the saxophone. He was just so cool. And I had a childhood friend, Reverend Michael Neal, who played the sax, and so I always thought the sax was cool and wanted to play the sax, honestly. And then, of course, I picked up the clarinet one day and was able to play it without even having training. And so, of course, it became something that was just a gift, I believe, but still wanted to play, saxophone. So I played bass clarinet. But I remember playing in the band at Middleton. And Greg Dunn was moonlighting as a teacher, but he was a jazz trumpeter, and he took some rowdy, rambunctious kids and tried to teach us, different genres of music. But to his heart, he loved jazz, and so of course, jazz became a part of the repertoire when I was a junior high school student. And he taught us a rendition of Duke Ellington's "Things Ain't What They Used to Be," and that started it. It was nurtured, I think, in a real sense by just my love for music. I was one of those children. My mother had music around me. I'm a child of music. And of course, I'm a 70s, 80s child. So, of course, I was grooving with my mom, who loved Earth, Wind, and Fire, and Peabo Bryson, of course, Teddy Pendergrass, and, so on and so forth. So, different genres of music were a part of the ethos of my growing up, but jazz touched a different spot and a different space for me. So as I moved from high school to college, of course I went through that era where everybody thought, and I don't want to offend, but if I do, then I apologize before I say this, but everybody went through that spin of thinking, of course, that Kenny G was jazz. But of course, we were playing jazz because we were, footloose and fancy free, if you know what I'm saying. But then I recognized the real difference, honestly, when I started buying music for myself. And I started buying different tapes, cassette tapes, of course, Count Basie, Duke Ellington, Miles Davis, and started collecting and having my own jazz collection, which was nurtured at every level, especially when I started pastoring. And I want to give these two gentlemen who now sleep with Jesus a shout out, Curtis Mingall and Ronald Everett. We would visit them, my wife and I, when we served St. James in Goldsboro. We would go and visit them, and they would have records on, CDs on. And so they gave me my first John Coltrane, Houston Person, Miles Davis CDs. And from there, I just started feeding off of it and really developed a hunger for just what does this jazz idiom mean, not just for those of us who love music, but what does this mean clearly for those who've been kissed by nature's son. And so those two gentlemen really nurtured it for me. And then, of course, having served in New York, Brooklyn, New York, and then my wife, who knew I loved jazz, would get us tickets to go see jazz artists at the Village Vanguard and Birdland Jazz and the Blue Note Jazz Club. So, of course, we frequented a couple of those spots, and we just sit on the set and just listen to jazz. But I have to be honest, I think, one television show and movie that kind of helped nurture it also was The Cosby Show. Listening to the music that they brought, the richness of the music. Oh my goodness. Tito Puente. I mean, all of those artists, man, listen, it was just a movable feast for me. and then the movie Mo Better Blues, as I shared in the article.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that
Yeah.
because you talked about how that movie was redemptive and how you saw the redemption in there and so many things, but it sounds like that you've had an eclectic education in jazz. But I want you to tell me a little bit more about Mo Better Blues and how what you found in that movie.
Mo Better Blues for me was the drama and the music coincided. There you have, of course, Bleak Gilliam, Shadow Henderson. Everybody's pretty much trying to find their sense of purpose and identity. To give a little justice spin to it, of course, they're playing in a club that is really exploiting their gifts and talents. They're trying to find a sense of identity. Bleak is, actually searching for love, doesn't necessarily find it in his trumpet. And of course, he has relationships where, they're not as healthy. They're a little bit dysfunctional. And so they're going through these different changes in their lives, the different characters and what they're dealing with. These are human beings. And I like the fact that they're human. They're dealing with human issues. They're gifted. They're talented. They understand the jazz impulse, but at the same time, they're human. So the humanity of the whole drama of Mo Better Blues. And if my wife is watching, and I know she will, I'll probably put it on tonight and watch it again for the 115th time. Because, I like the movements and the music coincide in such a way that when you're listening to the soundtrack, it's really the soundtrack of their lives and how things are trafficking from one situation to another. So for me, Mo Better Blues, in large measure, represents how Bleak Gilliam, who is the main character played by Denzel, how he comes to this place of a love supreme and how he discovers it, not in his trumpet, not in the various trysts that he's engaged in, but he discovers it deep within his own soul. And it makes a difference all the ways he goes. And so, of course, when you get to that piece, a love supreme acknowledgement, I think it's an acknowledgement of the power of love that transcends all the things we put our energies into. And we discover, it's deeper than what we can do. It's who we are and it's whose we are. And as we give ourselves to love and to life, and as we give ourselves to God, we experience a love supreme. So I love the improvisation, the instruments. Of course, everybody who plays the various instruments really, for me, represents their personality to some degree. But it also speaks to their struggles with how do we live life together? Because there was a tension with that, the tension of how do we live life together? How do we walk together and not just see through each other, but see each other through? And I think that's what we discover at the end. And a love supreme kind of wraps all that up for me.
So talking about a love supreme, because in the article that you wrote, you kind of walk that thing down like a sermon, and I'm inclined to think that your sermons may contain some of the elements of jazz. Does your love of jazz inform your preaching style, and if so, how?
That's a good question. Kirk Byron Jones, who I met as a doctoral student, wrote The Jazz of Preaching in 2004. But before he wrote The Jazz of Preaching, he had two other books that he kind of hints at the need for us to have a jazz impulse. And of course, his love of jazz comes out in his first two books, Addicted to Hurry and Rest in the Storm. And so I gained from that. And then, of course, when he writes The Jazz of Preaching, of course, that just sends me in and sends me over the top. I think what he does for me is he merges the spirituality that comes out of the jazz impulse and helps us to see that preaching is an art of love. It's art. And for me, preaching is art. I have friends, we talk often. For some, preaching is a science. They look at it scientifically like a scientist. I'm an artist. So I look at it from an artistic standpoint. And so what I'm trying to do is hopefully now as I've gotten older is just lose myself in the love of God, that it just comes out through my pores as I preach. So one of the components of jazz, of course, is improvisation, where we riff, and I think that's part of preaching, where, yeah, you have your structure, you have things that you want to say. For those who write manuscripts or outlines, you have everything kind of lined up and aligned based on where you want to go and how you want to get there. But then there are those beatific moments. I like your terminology that you use. I know you may not remember it, but perhaps you do. Serendipitous moments.
Oh, yes. God creates serendipitous meetings between preparation and opportunity.
Listen, I think that's what happens in proclamation, between preparation in the study and proclamation in the pulpit. I think, once you get into that space, and I can visualize certain pulpits where I really felt that energy. I feel it, of course, at Trinity, and I felt it in many of, and well, all of the pulpits that I've served. But once I became conscious of it, it just became that much stronger. That my love for God and my love for people and the joy of preaching. Some folks say, I gotta preach Sunday. No, I don't say I gotta preach. I say I get to preach. And the fact that I'm there, it's a love symphony for me. It's a love supreme. And so I take all of that into the preaching moment. And when the wind starts blowing, I gotta go with the flow. I gotta riff.
Yeah.
I can't just, okay, yeah, I know I need to get to this last point. I know I want to put this illustration in. But jazz is a genre of music where it's not that you finish, it's not, you just stop in jazz. It's not a, you don't get this big finish in jazz most of the time. It's just a plate, you just stop. And there are times when I'm preaching, I'll say it, I ain't finished. I'm just stopping right here for your sake, as Bill Jones would say. And I would, just, because of course, when the flow, I think when the Spirit descends, or in some cases when the Spirit starts gushing up like rivers of water, I think you just have to let it flow and let it go and not get caught up in structure. Because I do have a tendency sometimes to get caught up in structure. But when the Spirit, and I said it, Terry Lynn Carrington is right, jazz is a spirit. So when the Spirit kind of moves you, you have to flow with it. You have to go with the flow. And for me, that's what I think preaching does. And I think it's the flow of love. It's not something you can conjure or manufacture. I think it's something that just comes from the deep place, and it comes out, it gushes out, and it flows out. And I think it flows out through the conduit of love. That's me. That's where I try to preach. Used to be a time where I tried to do it and, try to make sure folk knew how much I know. But now I preach because I want folk to see how much God cares. God loves.
That is good.
Love supreme. That's me.
That is good. That is good.
That's where I am.
So now in the article, you said that jazz is God's gift to America and an ever-evolving gift to you. How has it been a gift to America, and how has it been a gift to you? And how does the continued evolution of the genre impact your love of it?
I'm going to have to take that one bite at a time.
Take it one bite at a time. That's it.
Okay. All right. Jazz is God's gift to America. I think it's an unwanted gift. I think it's an unwrapped gift. I think if we really take jazz seriously, it changes the way we look at leadership. I think it will change the way we look at ministry. I picked up a book some years ago entitled Jazzocracy, and it's by a jazz bassist who talks about how the American myth and the jazz impulse, if ever they came together, we could really see a major transformation. I think his argument is that democracy ought to look like a jazz symphony, that we give each person space and voice to share their gift. And I think what we're seeing now in the country and the culture, and dare I say even in the church, is that, there's one dominant voice, there are just one dominant instrument. But I think when you look at the various diversity of gifts and you start looking at it from the standpoint of scripture, but just through the jazz impulse, for me, you start seeing that everybody's voice is important. Everybody's contribution is important. I think that's what Mo Better Blues taught me, that no one instrument dominates the other. They all complement each other and they're flowing. And there's an underlying beat that keeps people moving forward. And I think jazz, being God's gift to America, is an invitation for us really to learn how to appreciate each other's voices, to appreciate the voices that inform our lives and shape our lives. I think it's a gift that's ever revolving, because at one point, I was working real hard to be a jazz aficionado, as you said, but now, man, I just want to be reshaped by jazz in a way that it helps me to see that I don't have to look like this. I don't have to look with tunnel vision. There's a world around us, and we need to pay attention to it. And I think we play ourselves cheap and we play small when we are not listening to the various instruments, personalities, spirits, people around us who enrich our lives. And I'm just thankful that God has blessed me with those voices. And those voices have helped to bless my life. And they've helped me to shape my own voice. And that's what I try to teach as a preaching professor. Yo, listen, find your voice. Don't try to sound like nobody but you. And I think if you develop that voice and you develop that rhythm for your life, man, it can make a difference, and people need to see it, because for me, jazz is freedom. And we're the Freedom Church. And believe it or not, I don't know if anybody knows this. I was going to get to this later, but Duke Ellington was a member of the AMEZ Church. John Coltrane, member of the AMEZ Church. His grandfather pastored St. Stephen's Hamlet, St. Stephen's High Point. And there's an annual festival, John Coltrane Festival, which I will be attending and have been. I'm going to be up in the place, me and Lynn. But it's Lynn and I, rather. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Anywho, but I mean, our church has embraced, and I was just reading a book recently that talks about how Duke Ellington, man, would have sacred jazz concerts at First Church, where I served as pastor, and Mother Zion. So he brought that, and I think that came from his upbringing in the AMEZ Church. And I think that's why it's freedom. It's freedom for me. Yeah, Sister Joan is that's my jazz wife, believe it or not. She really blesses me. We share that, and she's given me some great CDs from John Coltrane. Thanks, Miss Capel, for feeding my jazz hunger. But listen, I think it evolves and it helps us to evolve. And I think if we really take it in and take it on, I think it can really bring a renaissance and a revolution that we so desperately need in this country. It helps me personally. It helps me to get beyond the rigidity that I can find myself in. And I can be real rigid. But jazz is that spirit that helps me free up and try easy. Yeah.
Now, you got all poetic on me when you said in the article, jazz is the invitation to escape the dismal doldrums of rigid, regimented occupation into the bright, blissful space of love, a love supreme. I want you to talk about that just a little bit more, because you always talk about my words, but you did that time, okay?
Yo, listen. Jazz poetry is something I love. I try to write poetry and try to jazz it up. And I've listened to you, so of course you're the master at it.
Mhm.
Um, I'll give you a hermeneutic for it. Um, During the pandemic, I think I preached some of my best sermons. Honestly, uh, I had nobody in the sanctuary. Uh, it was just me, cameras, some musicians, Daran Kent, who got us started with doing pre-records and getting us, into this technological era. And then my son, who picked up the mantle and was trained by DK and picked it up and is doing his thing. But listen, I preached my greatest, I believe, during the pandemic, and we're still in it, of course.
Mhm.
But during the first part of quarantine, I preached a sermon entitled "The Love Supreme," and I took it from John 3 with Nicodemus.
Mhm.
I think Nicodemus saw freedom in Jesus and wanted to know, how can I be free like that? He saw the jazzy Jesus,
Ah.
the Jesus that was not bound by strictures and structures, the Jesus that was free, flowing, and says, well, listen, there's something different about you. And Jesus says to him, bro, you can have it, but you got to be born again. You can't just do it the way you've been doing it. You got to be born again. And of course, we let the evangelicals take us into these different flights of shallowness. But honestly, man, to be born again, to experience rebirth, and then for Jesus to say to Nicodemus those famous words in John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave. And that gift was a love supreme. I think he was trying to get Nicodemus to come out of this rigidity that oftentimes we find ourselves imprisoned by, and to come into this space of freedom and joy where you can experience love in high definition.
Mhm.
And so, when the spirit falls on me, when I open to spirit, I find that happening for me. And it happened for me, honestly, during this pandemic. It happened for me. And that's why every morning when I wake up, my alarm is Acknowledgement by John Coltrane. And it says to me, I'm born again.
Mhm.
I'm born again. I get another chance. I get another opportunity. Grace has been given to me. And I think that's given by love supreme. So I think when we experience that, I think we experience, I think, the true essence of what it means to be saved.
Mhm. Now, if you want to the audience, if you want to get more of this article that I keep referring to, it is in the next issue of Star of Zion coming up in July. So make sure you get that. It was really a great read, and it just solidified the reason why when I thought about Black Music Month and I thought about jazz, I thought about you. Because I don't, like I said, I don't know that much about jazz, but I want to know more because of what I read and because of how it shaped you, because rigidity is something that I am not a fan of, and the
I know.
improvisation and the movement and the impulsiveness of jazz is very, very interesting to me. And so I don't know, Dr. Mitchell, what else would you like to share with us about jazz? Maybe there's another thing that I might not have asked you as a question, but that you would like to share with the audience about how we can use. I see a lot of comments where people are mentioning that they have jazz vespers. I really believe that because we as human beings created in God's image are created with an innate love of music, I know that certainly music adds something to the worship experience. How would you see incorporating more jazz into our worship experience?
Ooh. I take you to First AMEZ Zion Church, Brooklyn, New York. I was blessed to serve as pastor there for 8 years, and there's some people who are on now. I see Reverend Critchlow. That was a space for jazz. When I got there, I fell heir to some great jazz musicians, Reggie Pittman, Rodney Seal, they may be on. And then, of course, others joined, and most of the music department was jazz. They were jazz musicians. And so, of course, the congregation embraced jazz. It was as if, it was almost second nature. And then, of course, Mother Zion, Mother Church had jazz vespers. Other churches had jazz vespers. I think how we get to that place and point requires some teaching. I think we have to introduce some things. I think we do it and don't even know we're doing it. How we collaborate. You asked me about, a person. Duke Ellington, for me, is the greatest collaborator. He learned how to collaborate with musicians to form that jazz power and spirit. I think we have to get it in our DNA. It's already in our DNA. It's already in us. I mean, it comes from our Africanness. Our music is in our souls. This sacred secular dichotomy that we live in, that was forced on us, and many of us have really mastered it and have been mastered by it. But the sacred secular dichotomy was never a part of who we are and were as people of faith, kissed by nature's son. I think we have to introduce it not as something that we're forcing on anyone. I think it has to be introduced and presented to us as an opportunity for us to experience joy. And I heard Dr. G. Ray Coleman say this, that you have to look high and low for a church that really experiences and expresses and exudes joy. So much of our work is drudgery, and we come in, as if this is a chore. But the joy of the Lord, the Bible says, is our strength.
Yes.
And so we're strengthened by the joy. And I think God majors in jazz. I mean, you go from Genesis to Revelation, the resurrection, the creation story, all of that is God's infinite improvisational impulse to take mess and make it a miracle and give meaning to it. I mean, Easter. I mean, you think of anything. Pentecost, it was the wind that blew. No one knew what was going to happen that day. The wind blew, and it changed and transformed unlettered, unlearned Galileans into radiant, triumphant heralds of the gospel. And they drew into people's lives a sense of community. That's how the church grew. It was the freedom. It was really the precursor to what we call the Freedom Church. We are the Freedom Church. And so if we just embrace the freedom to be ourselves and to flow in that, I think it won't become something that we make a chore. I think if we make it a joy and a part of our lives, I think you'll see the difference. I know I'm rambling at this point.
No, that's okay. You said something about the separation of the sacred and the secular. And I think that maybe keeps many of us bound from enjoying other genres of music, because we believe that we should only, as Christians, be listening to the music of the Lord.
Right.
And we shouldn't listen to anything else. But God gifts each of us uniquely, and God gives musical gifts to human beings. And how
Absolutely.
could you miss being blessed by the beauty that was the voice of Whitney Houston, because she didn't only sing gospel?
But many of them, if not all of them, had their genesis in the church, in the Black church. They were nurtured in the womb of the Black church, in the ethos of the Black church. And they took that sacred ethos and infected the culture with it through the different genres, R&B, hip hop. I mean, you can't put us in a box. You can't put us in a bag. We're gifted. We're too gifted. I know we use the word anointed, and I'm gonna use it. We're too anointed to be, boxed in. The Bible says all things are yours, and I really believe that were it not for the jazz impulse and for the taproot from which all of the genres, especially Black music, flow from, that taproot. Yes, it comes from Africa. It finds its way to America. It finds its fount in the spirituals and the moans and the shouts and the cries. Dr. Wyatt Walker talks about the music tree and how the roots of that music tree have flowed in many different directions. Blues, you name it.
Right.
And this is our gift to America that in many cases has been exploited by us. It's also been neglected by us as well. But I think if we embrace it, it has truth that makes us free.
Oh, wow. That is this has been a very rich and wonderful conversation, Dr. Mitchell. And I just, I don't know if we can if we have some more questions. I would love to ask Dr. Mitchell some more of your questions. This is a beautiful thing, because I have some other questions that I like to ask as I get to the end of this, at the end of this interview. Thank you, first of all, for really, for spending this time with us. So the question that I call these my fun questions, and you can take as much time as you need to answer these. But the first one is, if you could have any superpower, whether it exists or not, even if you have to make it up, what would it be and why?
I want to fly. Superman was my superhero. And when I was growing up, I used to try to be Superman. And of course, there's a lady at my home church, Hood Temple, Gloria Troop is her name. Love that lady. She still calls me Superman. She's been calling me, I'll be 50 in September. Yo, she still calls me, hey, Superman, because I wanted to fly. There's something about the air for me that gives me life. I love water. I'm from Florida. I love the air. It gives me life. And air is freedom. It's open to fly. That would be my superpower.
Okay.
To fly. We used to sing, I Believe I Can Fly. I think I'm going to leave that alone because, he's in a little trouble.
Yeah.
We pray for
I see your wife is referring to you as Superman.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's right. Superman.
All right. All right.
But the air,
yeah,
breathing. During the pandemic, my wife and I had COVID, and one of the things that we treasured were the walks that we would take in the mornings, and the air, and being able to breathe. And of course, for me, being outside and being free in the open air is a joy for me. I remember we tried doing outdoor services at Trinity Church, and I loved them. But of course, that's a little different. I was in my jazz muse, but I loved it, being outside in the open air. So flying for me, I wish I could fly. Yeah.
That's awesome. Now, I want to ask you this question, and I'm going to throw an extra one in there because I think it's appropriate. The other question is, if you could have dinner with any person in history, alive or dead, who would it be? And what would you talk about? What would you want to ask them?
Duke Ellington. Duke Ellington. I see you, Patricia Gaynor. Kick her off. Telling my business. Listen. Duke Ellington. I love Duke Ellington. I loved him because he took so seriously the faith of our fathers and mothers, and he translated it into a language that showed his reverence for it. But above and beyond that, Duke Ellington for me was one of the greatest collaborators. He knew how to bring people together. And those members of Trinity who may be on tonight, they all know that, I operate on the 4 C's at Trinity. And the first C is collaboration. Who are you bringing with you? Who do you bring in the mix? And Duke Ellington had that gift. And I believe that from reading his biographies and just the things that he talks about and who he brought into the mix, for me, I'd love to sit with him to talk about how do you bring different personalities with different egos, and everybody has their own ego, and you bring them together in one space to create beautiful music. I believe that's a miracle. I believe that's ministry. I believe that's leadership. How do you and we have leaders that can do that effectively and powerfully, bring people together, create that synergy. As you know, I served with Bishop Battle for 22 years, and he had an uncanny ability of bringing people together. And you didn't know what he was doing, but he was bringing us all together. I'm like, yo, that was Duke Ellington's way. He brought people together. He interlocked people's lives. And I would love to just have conversation with him on how do we do that in a world and a culture that is so hell-bent on being divided. Yeah, LeCount. I mean, that was Duke's ability. He made you feel like you were a part, that you belonged. It was never about fitting in. It was about belonging. And so when he brought those collaborations together, Miles Davis and John Coltrane had a tremendous collaboration. When they put together, I'm not sure the album that they worked on, but when Miles and John worked together, that was a masterful collaboration. And so with Duke Ellington, I would like to sit down and have conversation with him about how do you do that? We've seen it with Quincy Jones and many other artists, Ray Charles, others who were masterful collaborators. But for me tonight, it's Duke Ellington. I would sit with him, man, and just glean from him because he was a masterful collaborator. He brought people together. And I think we need that. Even in the church, especially the Black church. Right now, we need people to come together.
Yes. Thank you so much for that question. Now, the next question I want to ask you is when it comes to improvisational vocalizations or scatting, who would you say is the best, alive or dead at that? Now, I have some people that I like, but they're like new school, like Lettucey and Layla Hathaway and Jill Scott a little bit. Like I said, I don't know that much about that, but those are the ones that I like. So tell me a little bit about who you think does the best improvisational vocalizations.
You just said it, Deidre. You just said it. Jill Scott, my girl.
Oh, yeah. Ain't she?
Okay,
oh,
God, man, listen. That was the first concert. When we came to Greensboro to serve at Trinity Church, the first concert I took my wife to was Jill Scott. Jill Scott, I mean, there's honey in that voice, man.
Yes.
I don't want to go too far and deep because I got to go to bed and I don't want to sleep with one eye open. But yeah, Jill Scott. Yeah, Jill Scott is major. I
hear somebody saying Ella
Fitzgerald.
Yeah.
Oh God, man, yeah, Ella Fitzgerald, the intimate Ella. I was listening to Ella I try to listen to Ella when I'm preparing sermons, especially when I'm stumped. And there's an interesting story that Kirk Byron Jones tells about how Ella blessed his life in a strange way. He was trying to be rebellious and mad with God, so he didn't put on gospel to prepare his sermon. He put Ella on, and Ella touched his soul in such a way that floods of joy and tears started flowing. Yeah, Ella has a tremendous gift. I have her biography, and I want to look at it at some point. I got a lot of books behind me that I want to read, but yeah, Ella is a gift, true gift. Betty Carter, yes, Betty Carter. That's another one. Betty Carter. Again, Bill Cosby, for all that he was not and all of his human struggles, one thing he did was introduce us to the genre of jazz and brought those personalities on. That really blessed our lives. Betty Carter being one. I mean, so listen. And then of course, Ella Fitzgerald and Louis Armstrong have a collaboration that, oh God, yeah, you got to check that out. That's powerful. Sarah Vaughan, absolutely, yeah. But yeah, I'm gonna lean on Jill Scott tonight. That's my girl.
Do you have any particular jazz piece that you would like to share with us tonight that we could hear? Maybe something, maybe a little Love Supreme, because you talk about it so much, and I had to go and listen to it because I didn't really know a Love Supreme. So I had to go
man. Oh man, listen. I do have some stuff here, but let's see. Since you mentioned this earlier, Terry Lynn Carrington is a phenomenal musician and drummer, and her first cut, and the album is entitled "Jazz is a Spirit." So I shared this in the Jazz of Preaching. So this is one. It's a little different. Can you hear that?
Jazz. Can you hear it?
Yeah, I see we have in the comments, Naima. My granddaughter is actually named after that piece.
Wow.
Naima, yeah.
Jazz is a spirit.
Yeah, you see it? You feel it?
Yeah.
Terry Lynn Carrington was asked.
Perpetual moments of pure creativity.
Ah, there it is.
Jazz is abandonment.
Abandonment within boundaries.
The logical undoing of what you think it's supposed to be.
The logical undoing of what you think it's supposed to be. Yo. Jazz. Collective storytelling.
Jazz is collective storytelling.
There it is.
Expressing the history and experience of a people.
You hear that? Expressing the history and experience of a people. No category. Jazz means no category. Yeah, that's the definition for me.
Jazz means no category. Allowing for continuous.
I like that. So, Dr. Mitchell, if somebody is newly interested in jazz, where would you suggest they start to find out a little bit more, to find some musicians that they like, or instruments, that how would you mentor somebody who's interested in learning more about jazz?
When I teach the Jazz of Preaching at Hood, I do a history of jazz, and there's a phenomenal DVD by Ken Burns. He does a tremendous documentary. There's another one that I use that I can't think of the name or the author of it, but I would start with the documentary. Someone just to give a cursory glance or history of jazz. And then I would look at certain anthologies that are part of the jazz standards. So of course, there are books that you can pick up. There's one that I when I started actually really trying to get deeper into it, it's How to Listen Jazz by Ted Goya, Goia, I think is his last name. How to Listen to Jazz. I would strongly urge you to pick up some anthologies. I think that would be a good place to start. Downbeat Jazz Magazine, Jazz Times magazines, those kinds of things. But first, just get a good history of jazz, and then just take it from there. Get the history of jazz, and then move on from there. Then how to listen to jazz, because I'm still learning to listen to jazz. There's a class over at UNCG that I'm really trying to get over to take, but it always clashes with my schedule on how to listen to jazz. I think, those are some things that can help you. If there's a jazz class in your area, or a jazz class that is offered, jazz course that is offered that you can audit, do that. Hopefully I'm going to offer again the Jazz of Preaching at Hood. I've just got to make sure the dean approves it. But
can I come and audit that class, please?
I thought you took that class, dude. I didn't know.
I take that class? I don't remember.
No, you probably didn't.
I don't think I took that class. I think I signed up for it or something, but then we didn't have it or something like that. I can't remember.
No, it made every time I offered it,
okay,
but it was
maybe intensive. I just couldn't take it that semester.
Yeah, it was an intensive, so
really that's truly, what it is. I didn't do any intensives.
Yeah, you didn't take any intensives. I remember.
No, I did not.
But every time I offered it as an intensive, the evaluation would come back. This should have been a semester-long course.
Yeah,
and it should be, because there's so much that we don't cover. Some of the stuff that I would have them doing in jazz, that I'm in the Jazz of Preaching, that I brought even into my preaching class. I'm teaching preaching now, the required course at Hood. And so now I have my students read nursery rhymes. I have them read poetry. I have them read children's story books, especially children's story books from our idiom. And so it helps to shape the rhythm that you need. And then it's also about creativity. So I remember when I taught the Jazz of Preaching, I would have them draw what their text was really saying, draw it out artistically, artistically. So those are ways that you can really, really pull in the jazz idiom.
Okay. Now we have a question from the editor. How important is it for a millennial generation to learn to listen to jazz and understand jazz? And how does it translate to today, like hip hop and contemporary gospel and some of the other musics that jazz really lays the foundation for? How do we help them make that connection so that they can see how important this genre of music really is?
Oh man, I need some folk that are more proficient to kind of help with that. Many of the hip hop artists, Tribe Called Quest, those I listen to, the hip hop artists, Common, they all sample from jazz. And so I think if they're listening and they have someone to guide them, like I said, I'm still, I don't know if I'm an aficionado, I'm just an enthusiast. And a lover of jazz, but I think you need someone that has an ear that can listen to the particular nuances that you will find in hip hop and you'll find in contemporary and gospel music, especially. I mean, for the most part, I would encourage someone to watch a movie like Ray. Yeah, Ray. I mean, Ray pulled different genres when you listen to his music. Just watch Ray. I think that would be a good start. How, you know, how they pull from different genres. Yeah, Nas's father was a jazz artist. So I mean, you hear it with different artists, I think, if you just pay attention to it and listen to it. And not get so political with it. I think once you get political with it and you have those tensions and egos start moving, then you miss the joy of discovery.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we miss, because we're so hell bent on telling folk, all right, it has to be a certain way, and we've allowed people to teach us and tutor us in this hierarchy. So we get rigid with the hierarchy, but because we are not of that mindset and consciousness, I think we have to get back to, you know, what is really essential. So I hope that we can do that. Spike Lee's, yeah, that's right. Spike Lee's father was a jazz artist. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Mitchell, I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us about your love of jazz
Oh,
on
man.
this, the last day of Black Music Month.
Yeah.
As we explore what the soundtrack is of your life. But what is the soundtrack of your life? If you'd like to share it, feel free to email entertainment_arts@starofzion.org. And I just want to again thank you all so much for hanging out with us tonight as we discuss this. And remember that you can eat the entire world one bite at a time. Deuces, I'm going to give it back to our managing editor of the Star of Zion, Reverend Sam Brown.
Wow, what a phenomenal, uplifting conversation. So refreshing. Thank you so much, Reverend Parker Rowson and Dr. Mitchell. Thank you so much for giving your time to come and share with us here at the Star of Zion. You can see that this was well received by all of our viewers, and we are certainly looking forward to more programming and content just like this. Once again, this will be archived on our YouTube channel and on our website, www.starofzion.org. Please go subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on Facebook for all of the latest happenings in the AMEZ Zion Church and around the world. We have some exciting things that are forthcoming from the Star of Zion, one of which we are so excited to announce to you that our newly updated bishop's poster showing the historic succession of prelates throughout the history of the AMEZ Zion Church from 1822 until present day. We're so thankful to now be able to get this to you in 3 different ways. You can order just the poster only for $19.99 plus shipping and handling. Of the poster with a basic frame for $35 plus shipping and handling, or you can get an antique style, more ornate frame for $125 plus shipping and handling. Scan the QR code there, or you can visit our Facebook page and our website to be able to order that as well. We do want to let you all know that our programming will be going on a brief hiatus for the remainder of the month of July as we prepare to give ourselves a service to our church for our Connectional Council meeting, which will be meeting in July in Concord, North Carolina, beginning on the 25th. So we look forward to seeing you all there. Once again, thank you to all of you on behalf of our Chief Communications Officer and our Editor-in-Chief, Mr. Daran Kent. Thank you, Reverend Deirdre Parker Rowson and Dr. Mitchell, for a phenomenal conversation as we navigate through the soundtrack of our lives. Once again, this is the Star of Zion. Have a blessed evening.